that. In fact, the 51% thing, I think that's gone out the window in any case, and it is a developing work in progress, and it may well be, I'm not saying it will be the case, but it may well be that in fact the council or HBRC won't actually be asked to make any equity shareholding at all. But that'll develop over the next month or two. So if the wording without too much trouble could be just changed a little bit to indicate that it's effectively a global provision, it would be a bit clearer.
I think the key
less constraining.
I think the key things are that the financial provision that you have indicated in the draft annual plan and that you consulted on is still in place. That's the key amount, and that the process is still in its early stages. And then just really highlight then or state the conclusion that you got to as a result of submissions, and leave it at that. So maybe we have we're just reflecting on what Councillor Bevan has said. Maybe there's too much detail in that narrative, on the basis of where we're at the moment, so we can amend that. Yeah.
Anything else? Other questions, I suspect? Councillor Hewitt, sorry.
So I had made questions around what you've just agreed to update, so I'm happy with that. I have a question for page 300, and under resilient communities, we've got GMO-free Hawke's Bay. I've been asking for some time now, when will we be debating this? And I keep being assured we will be debating it. So I'd like to put it out there now that I don't think that fits under resilient communities, and you've heard me discuss a number of reasons in this council chamber recently why.
300. So you got a comment on that?
The only comment I would make is it was identified in the strategic plan that formed the basis of the long-term plan, and until that strategic plan gets reviewed, coming up over the next few months as a result, as you go through the long-term plan or development of the next one, you'll be in the process of reviewing that strategic plan.
So you will let me know when you get to debate it?
There'll be a session on it, I suspect.
I'll take the word on that.
I don't think it's going to sneak through somehow, Councillor Hewitt, if that's what you're asking. Any other questions? Councillor Scott.
Yes, Mr Chairman, I do think page 311 needs to be changed, and that we did agree to proceed with the investigation or the consultation or whatever on oil and gas, and there should be something in there to reflect that.
Yeah, Councillor, we did add in under performance targets 2014-15, second in the shaded column, initiate community engagement on oil and gas exploration policy development.
Okay, yeah.
To reflect the decision that you made as a result of the draft.
Obviously, I wasn't reading.
If you just run those words past me.
Sorry.
Page
so on
311.
page 311.
No, but I just want to hear you.
Sorry, it says initiate community engagement on oil and gas exploration policy development.
Exactly what she said.
No, but it's exactly what I wanted.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Yes.
Yeah, it's good. Further questions? Should we go back to how we're going to pay for that? Now that Ms Codlin's here. Now, were you brought up to speed? Was Mr Maxwell talking about the football results then, or was he giving you a heads up of what we were talking about?
Or state the question for me, that would be helpful.
Okay. Well, the consideration was around how we pay for oil and gas, our the policy development, and including public consultation potentially, and where the funding came from. And in the hearing process, we ended up in a place where the loan provision for outdoor open spaces, I'll get there, was 200,000 that be allocated across to cover off any work that may be done in oil and gas. And my question is, do we need to make that allocation? Can we somehow fit that into existing budgets and workloads I think I know the answer to it, but the challenge that we face as council is that the appropriate source of funding to cover it off? Open Spaces Fund, which is a loan provision, so are we going to borrow to do this work?
Well, I guess that's the challenge for you. But in terms of your first question is no, we don't have enough provision within the current team to start that community engagement. My question, and I'm not sure whether I should propose this, is what is the expectation around notifying a plan change around that? Is it expected in that current year to notify the plan change for that policy development?
Perhaps give us advice on a normal course of travel for, this has come out of the Parliamentary Commissioner's report. There is some work needs to be done. She's identified some stuff, and there's obviously a national work program that will ensue as well. But how are we going to deal with that report, and what are we going to do following that?
Well, from the work we've done, sort of since the councils has indicated that decision to the desire to proceed with a plan change for oil and gas, we've had a bit of a think about that, and certainly around the nationally there has been commentary on what the implication of the PCE report is, and particularly I'm not sure whether you received the copy of the Simpson-Grierson summary around it, but it is likely that there would be either a national policy statement or national environmental standard which might come out so that it can set the rules at a national level rather than at a regional level. What we were looking at doing in the first instance was bringing to the Regional Planning Committee in August a bit of a summary of the issues, I guess the planning process that we need to follow around developing a plan change for oil and gas, and it's not just as simple as let's just put a rule in there which makes it a discretionary activity. There is that whole Section 32 analysis that has to go with that as to alternatives. Is that the right way of doing it? There is certainly this community engagement. Some of that has been happened already. There will still need to be a community engagement with the industry sector alongside that, and they have certainly indicated, particularly for the tank process, and this was about 12 months ago now, that if there was discussion around oil and gas exploration in relation to the Hiratonga plants, then they would want to be in that table. So it's not, while it might be a particular issue, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a straightforward process.
So where does that leave us with the 200,000?
It seems to me the only other way of funding and looking at the cost of plan changes, 200,000 is merely going to be the first smell of it. It's not going to even get the jolly thing notified. Maybe I could ask Ms. Codlin, how much did HPUD's plan change cost us, which was probably the simplest plan change we've ever had?
Well, in terms of the plan, actually I couldn't tell you in terms of the plan change itself, but the strategy development process that supported that process. That was a jointly funded project from the three councils, and I think we each put in $100,000 for 3 years, I think, or was a total $300,000.
That's before
for that,
before it became
for the strategy, plan change. And then the plan change process after that.
But the other option is just to increase the deficit. We've agreed what the rate is. We can't increase the rate. So what happens if we increase the deficit? Whichever way, the ratepayers are going to end up paying for it. So if you borrow, you still have to repay the loan.
Well, they will, although at the moment, councillors, we do have a resolution for use of 200,000 from the Open Space Fund, which is in the plan. Our liability management policy on borrowing says we can't borrow for one-off projects. As Councillor Dick stated, the repayment of that loan does come from reserves and not the ratepayer. directly from the ratepayer. Audit comments, which I've got today and in writing, don't point to any part in the Local Government Act to preclude us specifically for borrowing for a one-off urgent requirement that this is. The only net we perhaps don't, the only thing we don't pass is Council's policy on the use of open spaces, which is a policy set by Council and consulted on, but set by Council, and one imagines can be amended by Council. But so there's the summary. So that's one option, just leave it where it is. The other one is put it to the bottom line and the deficit goes up 200,000.
Or spread over a couple of years.
Councillor Barker.
The cost is high.
Can I just make an observation about this process? This is one of the first organisations I've ever been engaged with which does not have a specific finance committee to deal with these things. We do not. And I don't know why, but I would argue for one. These are exactly the places these discussions should be held. Secondly, this is another classic example of where governance decisions conflict and so on with operational requirements to make the budgets work, and Debbie would refer to it as the gearbox. I think that I feel quite remote from this, and that there are quite a number of options which we could be considering here, which we can't because we don't get to grips with all the details. And I would think this is an exact problem that should be sent to a finance committee of the council, which is a mixture of councillors and the finance team, to say, well, this is the problem. You give us what the options are, sort it all out. What other things can we do? I just don't feel we've got all the information here to make it. But I support the 200,000. I'm not sure that the comparison that Councillor Scott has made with a plan change is necessarily the correct one. It doesn't work, but it is a rough guide. Maybe more, maybe less, I don't know.
And the question from that is, if the 200,000, as you've obviously seen the plan and seen how it sits, how does that, will that get us to the commentary around policy development, the 200,000? You weren't here during the hearing, so...
No, I wasn't. If the process is about community engagement, understanding the issues from both sides, and then coming up with a plan of a plan change, which if the council can give some direction as to the scope of that plan change, but recognising perhaps some of the risks that might be associated with it. I mean, for example, the council might decide, in order to minimise the costs and ensure the time frame is as short as possible, then it might be quite a simple change. If that happens and no further investigation work is required in terms of identifying where the risks are around, whether we might need to sort of spatially assess oil and gas exploration and development and the risks associated with that. If into that space, then that cost is probably insufficient for that. But if it's just basically based on our current level of knowledge and a reasonably tight plan change, you might get it to a plan notification in that cost. But the risk is that down the track, if we've cut corners, then the costs will come later in terms of taking it through the courts.
Councillor Bell.
It seems to me we're talking about two quite different levels of approach here. On the one hand, it's conceivable that we would want to look at, should oil and gas be developed in Hawke's Bay, period. There would be a certain chunk of the public who would be curious about the answer to that question. But what we have right in front of us now are applications coming in. We have very specific recommendations about the regional council role in this area from the parliamentary commissioner. It seems to me in the coming year, the least we could do would be to assess what she has to say against our own current provisions, which I think are basically non-existent because they only deal with water, and determine where do we want to start here and how do we get ahead of this process a bit, because meanwhile we're going to be processing consent applications in this area. So why would we not want to be at least getting to the point of, she made these dozen recommendations. We've consulted with various parties that are relevant to consult with as to what's the wisdom of those, how serious a change do they involve for us as a council, et cetera, et cetera. At least get that process going. And that doesn't sound to me like a budget buster. And it also seems like an essential activity to be undertaking over the next year.
Well, I think, as I said, Councillor, that's I guess the scope discussion that staff need to understand that, and that's what I said, that if it is limited, it could be done within that budget. But I say there are some risks associated with that, but if the issue or the problem definition is well defined in the first context, that we just want to at least do this pending the NES or NPS coming through, then that might provide us a bit more of a framework for managing the process, because it is about managing expectations too in terms of once you start this. But so if that's clear, if that can be made clear through a regional planning committee sort of resolution, then that might sort of facilitate things.
Chairman, there's a job that has to be done, but we don't have to gold plate the process. And whilst a reallocation from a fund that's there and is provided by borrowing but with a non-rating a source of repayment may not be seen as being totally pure and elegant, it's an expedient way to deal with it. The reason that I proposed it came out of that fund is that I have a view, Mr. Adey may disagree, that we've done the large bulk of what needs to be done in terms of providing for major community facility support for our TA partners, which is a major component of that scheme, and open spaces. It's the open spaces bit that's got a bit to do, but I'm not sure that there's $700,000 of foreseeable demand for work out there. So knocking a couple of $100,000 off that and shifting it over to this seemed to be a sensible, if not, as I say, elegant solution. The other way is, okay, if you say, well, we've got to be pure and we've got to keep that $700,000 fund intact, then bite the bullet and put $100,000 on the bottom line for the next 2 years and justify a rate increase because of the importance of the work.